This conference will now be recorded.
So today we'll be discussing about features of Pega. Okay. So yesterday we have discussed about what is Pega, what is the purpose, and on what basis this particular product was designed. So all those things, and also we have discussed about what is BPM and all those things, right? So today I will show you the environment, how it looks like, and I'll also discuss about a few features that Pega supports. So there was a question yesterday, how Pega is different from its competitors. I've made a statement yesterday saying that so Pega doesn't have any real competitors in BPM space. How? On what basis Pega tool is completely different from its competitors? It is because of its features. So what are the kind of features that Pega provides? So it is making Pega tool a way different from other competitors. Right. So I'll show you the environment first today. So ignore all the things, just concentrate. So this is once you log into this environment, so you will get initially this login screen, username and password. Once you click on this, so I'll give proper credentials. Oh my god, it failed. Some issue. Okay. It has logged in. Now ignore all the things. So this is called as a portal. So we'll come back to this. What is this portal? Why it has logged into this portal? So what is this header? What are all the screens? What are these explorers? So for now, you ignore all the things. Just I'll open one of the flows. So just concentrate on the screen itself. You need not to know about any other things for now. So this is the one something which is created as a part of your application. So this is the flow which is got created. And let's understand the first feature. The first feature of PRPC is auto code generation. What does an auto code generation means? It means that so once you design something, okay, so your code is automatically generated in the background. So it has that capacity. It accepts the rule forms as an input and generates Java code as an output for your application. So if you take this as an example, this flow I've created, okay, so in the background it has generated Java code. Where can I see the Java code which is generated for this particular rule? Click on actions and see something. There is something called as view Java. So this is the generated Java for this particular flow. See here, user did not create this Java. Okay, so it has been created by the system itself. So system has created around 6,700 lines for this particular flow. Ultimately, this code is executed in the background. Once I run this flow, let me run this flow. So click on actions, click on run. Click on run button. So once I run this flow, it has created some transaction where I can give customer details like first name, age, last name, gender, email ID, state, all those things I can configure. So what is happening in the background is the Java code is ultimately it is executing the code and it is creating a transaction for this particular flow. So the first feature or the first main feature of PRPC is auto code generation process. Once you define or once you configure a rule form or a form, so once you save the form, in the background code is generated. Ultimately that code will be executed in the background and it will serve your application purpose. So this is one of the main features that we have in PRPC. It's an automated code generation process. So coming to next. Applications are secured applications. If you create applications in PRPC, so those are secured applications. Why we are calling these applications as secured applications is because, so once we create an application, the application and the data which is related to the application are stored in a different format. Your applications, okay, all your rules in your application are converted to XML format. They are converted to XML format. Once you implement a logic in your application in the form of a form-based development process, so that form is converted to XML format. Why it has converted to XML format? Because of security purpose. So PRPC applications by default, they comes up with some basic level of security mechanisms. That is, by converting all your application structure into XML format, and ultimately the XML is stored in the database. It is not something which is stored directly in the database. It is converted to XML format, and this XML format is stored in the database. Now where can I see this particular XML format? I'll show you that. So from actions, so view XML. So ultimately this is the XML which got converted based on that particular rule. So whatever the flow that you are seeing on the UI, right, that rule form has been converted to XML format in the background. Ultimately, so the flow is stored in this particular format. It is not stored in the normal English or some format. So it is being converted to XML, and ultimately that XML is stored in the database, Pega database. So for that reason, we are calling this particular application as a secured application. It is not only this, there are few other things which are related for security mechanisms. So one is XML format, and other one is, there is one more format called as blob format. All your application data. See, application logic is different and the data for that particular logic is different. Say for example, let's take your application has a logic A equal to some B plus C. Assume that this is a simple logic that your application is performing. So what are A, see this logic A equal to B plus C logic is stored in XML format, and the data for A and data for B and data for C. So for example, if I give data for B equal to 5 and C equal to some 10, so automatically A will be calculated as 15. So B equal to 5, C equal to 10 are input, and A is calculated, that is 15. So this data, A equal to B equal to 5, C equal to 10, and A equal to 15, right? So this data is stored in a different format called as blob format. In the database, see, for your application, there are two things. One is your application logic, and the other one is the data associated for that particular application logic. Your application logic is stored in XML format, and the data associated for your application is stored in blob format. What is blob? So the abbreviation of blob is binary large object. So this is one of the formats which is stored for security purpose. So this is another level of security mechanism that is imposed on the data for application. So the abbreviation is blob, binary large object is the abbreviation. So I'll show you later point of time how this blob will look like. So in the database, in the table, it has a separate column called as PZPB stream bytes. In that PZPB stream bytes, we have this kind of format. The data is stored in binary large object. So based on these two factors, the applications which you built on Pega are secured applications. So if you wanted to have an additional security mechanisms, you have to build on top of this. Say for example, you want this XML format, you wanted to convert to another format. So you can make use of this XML format and you can convert it. So that flexibility is always there, but by default it comes with this basic security mechanism. Okay. Next one, this is what another feature. So next one is debugging tools. So one of the reasons why Pega is very different from its competitors is it has huge debugging tools, very sophisticated and very complex. If you have any kind of complex related issue, so that can be captured simply by using these tools. So there are 4 tools which are supported by Pega. So the first one is Live UI, second one is Tracer, and third one is Clipboard. Next one is Performance Analyzer, or simply we call it as PAL. So what are these purposes? So Live UI is something where you can debug your UI related issues. Now let's take the example. I have a screen called as customer details screen. Now see here, age is a mandatory field. So I got a requirement from the customer saying that no, your age should not be a mandatory field, it should be an optional field. Now I have to change this particular logic. How will you do that? So I have to debug this, right? So in the background, what is this age? So it's a property. How to change the configuration of this property? I'll show you that by using Live UI. See here, bottom you have all the tools: Tracer, Clipboard, Live UI, Performance Analyzer. These were the things that I was discussing, right? So now I'll use Live UI. I'll go to this and I'll open the tool. I'll open this particular property which is holding age. So let me open the properties of this particular age. See here, there is something called as required. I'll make it as never. Click on save. Now click on save. Now come back to this. Click on refresh. Now age is not a mandatory thing now. So this is how you have to debug your UI related elements by using Live UI. So basically Live UI is used to inspect all your user interface related issues. So that is about Live UI. Next, coming to Tracer. So what is a tracer? Tracer is nothing but it's a backend tracking of your rule. See this, I was telling you, this is one of the rules. If I wanted to trace this particular flow in the background or capture, so what is happening in the background, how to trace this? So for that you have to use Tracer. Once you on this Tracer and run the rule, so it will capture step by step of your screen. So I was telling you, by using forms you have to develop your application, right? If you wanted to trace your flow line by line, then you have to use Tracer. It is not only flow, any rule, any, in a sense. So this is flow, right? You have n number of rule types or n number of flow, what do we call it? So we have different rule types. Of one is a flow rule type, another one is property, another one is a section. We have different forms. So in order to debug those forms, you have to use Tracer. Tracer, what it will do is it will simply give all the information about that particular form. So for that reason, you have to use Tracer. Next one is Clipboard. What is a clipboard? So clipboard is something. I'll open the same example. See here, I've given first name, age, last name. I assume that I've given all the details and I've submitted this. Once I submit this, what happens? All the data will go and it will store in the table. It will go and it will store in the table. Now, if I wanted to get this information, if I wanted to see what is there in the first name and what is the value which is there in the age, last name, and all those things, I need not to go to the table. So all your table information is readily available on the clipboard. It is a kind of a temporary location which gives information about the current transaction that you are running on. So whatever the current transaction that your context is on, it will show you that related information on the clipboard. So for that, you need not to go to the table and see the data. You have to go to the table. So the data is available on the clipboard. It's a kind of a cache kind of thing. So what is cache? It's a temporary location which is stored. So instead of going to the database, I'll go to the cache and I'll see the data. It's a kind of cache for your application. Okay. So this is what clipboard means. Next one is PAL or performance analyzer. If you wanted to analyze the performance of your application, you have to use PAL. PAL in the sense performance analyzer. It will give you the stats. Once you run a flow or once you create a transaction, what happens is if you on this performance analyzer, it will give you various statistics information. What is the CPU usage? What is the memory usage? Okay, how many tables are involved? All the data is stored and it will display to the user in terms of this particular performance analyzer. So if you wanted to change your application logic, if you wanted to fix a bug, or if you wanted to add new requirements, so these tools are very, very important. So according to the need, you have to use it. If you wanted to analyze the performance, you have to use performance analyzer, that is PAL. If you wanted to debug UI related issues, you have to use live UI. If you wanted to track the backend part of your application, then you have to use tracer. If you wanted to debug the database related issues, you have to use clipboard. So according to the need, you have to use various debugging tools in your PRPC. Okay. This is about the debugging tools. So next one is reporting tools or reporting infrastructure. PRPC has got huge infrastructure on reporting. So if you wanted to generate a report, so you need not to use external tools in order to generate the reports. So PRPC comes up with inbuilt reporting infrastructure. So if you wanted to create a report, say for example, I wanted to generate a report, all the transactions with resolved rejected status. Assume that this is my requirement. What will you do? You will simply open a reporting form called as reporting UI form. You will configure, so what is the status, what is the transaction, or what is the date, all those things you will configure and you will save it. Once you save it, it will give you the report. You can perform n number of actions. You can make this available for other users. You can trigger an email from the reporting and you can send it to other users. So every report, say for example, this report, every day you wanted to run this report and send it to a mail across to the team. So that those kind of things are also possible by using reporting. Say for example, you wanted to get data from two different resources, two different databases. You can combine those two databases and you can get the data. So all these things are possible using reporting infrastructure, which is already there in the system. Okay. Next one is inbuilt APIs. What is an API? So the abbreviation of API is application programming interfaces. So API is nothing but inbuilt functionalities. So Pega has more than 1,000 inbuilt functionalities. Around 1,000 functionalities which are already implemented and placed in the product. Example, for every transaction you have to generate a transaction ID, right? For every transaction. So I'll show you the same example. So this is a transaction which got created. If you see here, concentrate on this C-174 and this is the status. New is the status. C-174 is the transaction ID for this particular transaction. So user hasn't created or he did not write any specific logic in order to make this happen in order to get the transaction ID. So user did not write any specific logic for this. By default, this logic is already written and user is using this particular logic in this background. So similarly, this status, new is the status. By default, it comes up with the new status whenever you run a transaction. So this is the status that is getting assigned by default. All your statuses, all your priorities, email capabilities, transaction ID generation. Okay. So there are huge number of inbuilt APIs which are already there in the product. So the thing is, you should know about these APIs. Say for example, if I wanted to send an email to all my registered users for this application, you can do it with some API which is already there in the system. So you have to use that API and you have to configure that API according to the need, and you have to run that API. Once you run this API, so it will trigger emails to all your users. So the important thing here is you should know about those APIs, and you should know about the usage of that particular API. So one part of our course is to learn about the APIs which is supported in the tool. Okay. So PRPC has inbuilt APIs. This is the next feature. So the next one is frameworks. So there are different kinds of frameworks which are already supported on this environment. By default, it has huge number of frameworks. Say for example, you wanted to design an insurance application. Okay, and health insurance application is your requirement. Okay. So you need not to start it from the scratch. If you wanted to design an insurance application, you need not to start from the scratch. So a framework, a basic framework which is already there and it is given out of the box as a part of the product, it is shipped. Now if you wanted to build your insurance application, you can use the framework which is already there in the system. So it will extend that framework and it will give it free. Now you can build on top of it. So industry specific frameworks are already there in the system and it will give for free. So apart from insurance, we have financial related things, financial related frameworks, customer support related frameworks, decision related frameworks. Okay. So customer service related frameworks, e-commerce related frameworks are already there in the system. So according to the application, according to your need, you have to choose your framework accordingly. Okay. So industry specific frameworks are there in your product. So this is about the frameworks. So next one is integration capabilities. Integration in a sense, say for example in real time, so there is every need one system should interact with another system. Example, if you go to a bank, assume that you wanted to open an account. What they'll ask you? They'll ask you for details, your first name, last name, and also they'll ask you for your Aadhaar details also. So if you gave some wrong Aadhaar ID, what happens? It will tell you, the system will tell you that the entered Aadhaar ID information is an incorrect. How does this banking application know that whether Aadhaar ID or the PAN number that is given by you is not a valid PAN number? Because your banking application is interacting with Aadhaar application. So those two applications are integrated. So in real time, if you wanted to integrate with other applications, see other applications in the sense, those applications might build in a different technology. See, your application might be built on Pega, and another application might be built on .NET. So how to interact with those two applications? there is something called as integration web services. So in the market, we have a number of web services like SOAP and REST, URI, all those things. So your PRPC or Pega tool supports all the web services which are there in the market. It supports, and it is very, very simple to interact with another application. So it's a kind of a wizard. You have to, if you wanted to interact with other applications using SOAP, assume that you have used the SOAP as a web service. Now what will you do is you will go to this particular product and there is a wizard. I'll show you the wizard. So integration connectors. So this is SOAP integration. If I wanted to integrate via SOAP, so I have to use this wizard. This is a 3-step wizard, and you have to load an appropriate information for this particular integration rule. And if you run this wizard, you will integrate with other applications. This is how simple it is. So it is not only supports another integration capabilities, it is very easy to configure the integration related rules. With minimal effort, you can integrate to other applications. Okay. This is another feature. Next one is applications which you build on Pega are faster applications. In the sense, assume that you have created one application which has 2 screens. The same application you have created in, assume that in another technology like C or C++ or Java, you take any technology. So now the throughput of your application, say for example, you have given the details and you have clicked on submit. So 1000 users are working on this particular application and 1000 users are working on the same application which is built on another technology. So the kind of performance it gives, it is very, very fast in PRPC if you compare with other technologies. Why it is considered as faster execution or it has good performance? Because the code is auto-generated. So the auto-generated code is already compiled and executed, and the executable code is placed in the system. Once you run the flow or once you create a transaction, so it will not, that compilation process, generation process will not happen every time. For the first time, generation process will happen, compilation process will happen from second time onwards. So it will run the executable code, executable Java code. So as this is already compiled and as executable Java code is already there in the system, so we call it as a faster applications. In the sense, performance wise, it has huge performance with comparing with other applications which are built on other technologies. So it is considered as 6 times it is more performant than other technologies. Okay. So these are few features which are there or supported for this particular tool. Any questions so far? Hello.
No.
So we'll continue further. So next topic is, I was telling you, once you build an application or your application building process is entirely via form-based development process. One form is equal to one rule in the background. Once you configure a form, in the background, it generates Java code, right? It generates the Java code in the background. Java is an object-oriented programming language. Your Java is built on object-oriented principles. Oops, we call it as OOPS concepts. So Pega is building Java code. So Pega also follows object-oriented principles. It also follows those concepts. So before we learn about this particular tool, we should understand what are object-oriented principles, right? So we'll understand that. Object-oriented principle. The first one is class. You should know what are these concepts. You need not to create it, but you should know what are object-oriented principles. First, we'll try to understand what is a class. The first object-oriented principle is a class. What is a class? So the definition of class is something like this. If you wanted to describe an entity, a real world entity, you have to use class. Say for example, you wanted to describe about a tree. So what is a tree? What is the purpose of a tree? What does tree will have? So what kind of tree it is? When will it bear fruits? Okay, so what's the height, what's the length, what is the age? So it describes about a real world entity. A real world entity can be anything. It can be a tree, it can be a pen, it can be an eraser, it can be a mobile device, it can be customer details, okay, it can be address details, anything. If you wanted to describe anything about an entity, then you have to create a class. So class is something which is a container of properties of your entity. Example, the same example, banking application, we'll try to take that analogy and we'll try to understand what is the class. So if you wanted to open an account in bank, what will you do? You will visit the bank. So the banker, what he'll do, he'll give you some hard copy to fill all your customer details. So what he'll do, he will write and he will fill all the details and he will give it back to the banker. So now you wanted to eliminate this process. You wanted to accept those customer details from the portal. You wanted to design a screen. You wanted to design a simple application. You wanted to capture the customer details screen. Now what will you do? So customer details. So if you wanted to design this, first you have to design your classes. So now what kind of classes you will have? You will have a customer class because you wanted to describe about a customer. So what you'll do, you'll create a class called as customer. In this customer, you'll have properties. What are those properties? First name, comma, last name, ID proof, comma, age. So generally we'll not ask age, we'll ask for date of birth. According to the date of birth, we'll calculate the age, right? We'll write a simple logic called as calculate age. We'll have some method. So this method, what it will do, it will take date of birth as an input and it will generate the age. Okay, so age is automatically calculated. So assume these are the details you wanted to capture for a customer. So now what will you do? You will create a class. So what is a class now? Your class is nothing but it's a collection of properties and methods of an entity. What is entity here? The entity is customer. So your class is describing about the customer. So what is in description is in what terms? In terms of first name, last name, ID proof, date of birth, and calculate age. So is it restricted to only customer? No, you can describe any real world entity. If you wanted to describe any real world entity, what you need to have? You need to have class. So this is about class. Next, we'll move on. Next one is object. The next object-oriented principle is object. What is object? Object is nothing but it is an instance of the class. So it's the same example, I'll continue. So I've created this class. Assume that there are 3 customers came to your bank or this for this application. They wanted to enter the details. So now what will you do? You'll create an instance for this particular class. So that is customer 1, comma, customer 2, comma, customer 3. So customer 1 will have all these details, customer 2 will have all these details, customer 3 will have all these details. So what is customer 1, customer 2 and customer 3? They are instances of this particular class. Now what is an object? Object is nothing but it is an instance of a class. In the above example, customer 1, customer 2 and customer 3 are objects for customer class. What is the meaning of instance or instantiating? The general meaning of instantiation is allocating some memory. It's called as an instantiation. So let's apply the same analogy for this particular object. So instantiation means you are actually allocating a dedicated memory in your application for this particular class. If I create an object called as customer1, it will dedicate some piece of memory for this particular customer1. So that memory has first name, last name, ID proof, date of birth and calculate age. If I create one more instance, it will allocate another memory for my class. If I create another customer, it will create another memory for this particular object. So ultimately, your customer is kind of a blueprint and your object is nothing but it's a kind of memory for that particular blueprint. It is something like this. An example, I'll give you some analogy for this to understand the difference between a class and an object. Say for example, you have a resume. You have the soft copy of your resume. Now you wanted to have 3 copies. You are attending some interview. You need to have some hard copies of those particular resume. What will you do? So assume the soft copy of your resume as a class. If I give 3 prints, it is nothing but I am creating 3 instances for that particular class. Okay. You have a resume, soft copy resume in your system. If you give a print, assume that you have given 3 prints. In the sense, you are creating 3 hard copies. Now apply the same analogy. Your soft copy is nothing but a class and your hard copy is nothing but an object. So you can apply that analogy for your class and object. So these are considered as a basic object-oriented principles, the class and the object. Again, in the class is divided into 2 types. One is concrete class, other one is abstract class. The first one is concrete, the next one is abstract. What is a concrete class? The definition is very simple. Concrete in the sense where you can create an object for your class are called as concrete class. If you cannot create an instance or object for a class, it is called as an abstract class. Based on whether you can create an object or whether you cannot create an object, you are calling the type of the class. If it is a concrete class, you can create instances or objects for that particular class. If you cannot create an object or an instance, then you call it as abstract classes. So this is the definition of concrete class and abstract class. Why we are saying why we need to have 2 types of classes, concrete and abstract? Why not a single class? See, you can assume in this way. You can ask me a question something like this. You have a class, and if you cannot create instances for this particular class, then what's the purpose of having that particular class? See, if you have a class, if you don't create an instance for that class, then what is the purpose? Hello, can you tell me what is the purpose of abstract classes? First of all, did you understand what is a class and an object?
Abstract classes are like reusable classes, right?
They are reusable classes. Is what your answer? Hello.
We cannot execute the code here, right?
No, forget about the code. We did not come to till that part, right? See, I've just given customer class.
We can define a business rule.
Yes, we can define the
Business rule
on
here.
your in your abstract class.
Yeah, abstract classes.
Yes. If I don't create an instance for that particular class, then what is the purpose of having that particular class? I'm telling you, abstract classes, you cannot create instances for that particular class. Then what is the purpose? So the purpose, okay, be on mute. I'll tell you. So I can understand for concrete classes, you can create instances and you can create customers. It is very clear for concrete classes. But whereas coming to abstract classes, it doesn't have it. We cannot create an instance. So the thing is, I was telling you in one of the features, PRPC or Pega comes up with huge number of inbuilt functionalities. It has built-in functionalities. 1000 plus inbuilt functionalities it has. Okay, so all the inbuilt functionalities are placed in the abstract classes. Abstract classes are used for the purpose of reusability. If you wanted to reuse a function at multiple number of places, then you have to write an abstract class and you have to place that particular functionality in the abstract class. Then you have to ship to the customers. So abstract classes are used for the purpose of reusability. Now, if there is a function, assume that there is a function called as addition function, addition of two numbers, a comma b. Assume that this is a reusable functionality. I wanted to ship this function. So I have written some function in this particular class and I have shipped to the customers. Now, if I cannot create an instance for this particular class, then how can I use this particular functionality? I cannot use it. So your abstract classes, you cannot use the functionality of that particular abstract classes directly. Directly, it is not possible. So what you have to do is, you have to inherit this particular class. You have to take all the functionalities which is there in this class and you have to create those functionalities in your custom classes. You have to create your own class called as custom, some name. Okay, now you have to use this particular functionality from this class. So for that, what you have to do is, you have to inherit this particular class. If you wanted to reuse the existing functionalities which are already there in the other classes, then you have to inherit that class. How will you inherit? Class custom. This is your own class which is created by the user. Now what will you do? You will inherit and you will extend this class, debo class, addition class. Now if you inherit, what happens? This function will be copied to your custom class. Now as this is your custom class, you can create instances and you can use this particular functionality. So this is how you will use your inbuilt functionalities through a concept called as inheritance. Now what is inheritance? Inheritance is something which you are trying to reuse existing functionalities. Inheritance is something, if you wanted to reuse the existing capabilities of your application or your product, so you have to use a concept called as inheritance. So inheritance is one of the object-oriented concept. So these three are the main object-oriented principles that you have to be aware of before you learn PRPC. Any questions on this? If you have any questions, you can ask me before we wind up for today.
Concrete means it is customized, right?
Need not to be. It is always need not to be a customized one. No, it's not like that. Concrete is something where you can run or create instances.
Yeah.
Okay, where you can actually create some kind of transactions on that particular class. It's called as a concrete. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thanks for joining. So tomorrow, what I'll do is I'll share you the tool software for this particular tool. I'll share you personal edition. Okay, I'll share it with you. You have to install those into your machines, and you should come for tomorrow's session.
Okay.
Okay. So if you wanted to, so now whatever the demo of free sessions that we are there, right? So those are completed. So from next session onwards, we'll be learning on the product, on the Pega tool. So
Okay.
if you wanted to attend that session, you have to confirm this course. Okay. So you can coordinate with your coordinators, respective coordinators, and you can speak with them if you have any issues. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for joining. Bye.